You'll sleep in the shed tonight." Hannah said it like she was setting out the recycling. Tidy, efficient, no room for argument. The sentence hung in the kitchen air with the smell of bleach and fried onions, and I felt it land in my chest the way a door lands when it's been shut a little too hard. I put my mug in the sink so gently the porcelain didn't dare clink. At 74, I have learned the power of quiet. It startles people more than shouting. Oliver wouldn't meet my eyes. He stood by the back door, thumb grazing the nick in the paint where Max had once jammed a scooter through, the good oak threshold gouged like a wound. "It's just for tonight, Mum," he said, but his voice had that tremor he gets when he wants to sound firm and only manages tired. "You know how she is about the carpets." "I know how she is," I answered, and reached for the dishcloth. My hands remember work. They always do. The cloth made a damp circle around the ring my mug had left, and I fixed on that, because staring at a circle is easier than staring at a sun who has nothing to give you but absence. Outside, the shed sulked under the eucalyptus, corrugated roof ticking from the day's heat. In winter, it sweats and smells of nails and mice. In summer, it smells of dried lawn and the last job no one finished. Hannah had been the one to name it the garden room, as if adding syllables could turn air into warmth. She'd put a candle in there once, a citronella thing that made my eyes sting. Tonight, there would be no candle. Tonight, there would be the thin camp mattress that hurts my hip and a spider in the corner that minds its own business better than most people I know. Lily already brushed her teeth, Hannah added, wiping the counter as if my presence were a smear. "We need the downstairs bathroom free. The plumber said the upstairs pressure won't hold if, well, it's just easier." Easier. That word again. People say easier when what they mean is for me. I folded the dishcloth, placed it over the tap's neck like a scarf. "Right," I said. "I'll take a blanket." Hannah's mouth softened into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Thank you for understanding, Margaret." She likes to say my name the way receptionists do, as if courtesy were the same thing as love. I walked down the hall that still remembers other footsteps, Oliver's small ones closing the space between us, the whir of his late father's drill, Lily's ballerina scuff, Max's dinosaur stomp. The night air met me at the back door, warm and windless. A moth thudded at the porch light like a tiny, steady fist. From the neighbor's tree, a blackbird sent out a string of notes that sounded like a question I didn't feel like answering. I took the blue wool blanket from the basket and the flat pillow no one else uses. The grass had been cut in straight lines. I could feel the ridges through my slippers. When I opened the shed, the familiar smell rose up. Cardboard, oil, a dampness that never quite leaves. I paused, because dignity likes pauses. I could go in, lie down, make myself small, be easy. Instead, I set the blanket over the sawhorse to air and stood a while. I listened to my heart knock once, twice, like it was asking permission to be brave. Isn't it strange how courage isn't a leap but a turning, the slow swing of a gate on a hinge you finally oil? Inside the house, a cartoon giggled from the sitting room. Lily's laugh lifted, then broke, then lifted again. Max shouted something about rockets. Oliver's voice, low. Hannah's, lower. Life arranging itself without me, the way water finds a way around a stone. I have never wanted to be a stone. I wanted to be soil, quiet and full and necessary. Soil doesn't boast, but it holds everything up. I went back inside for my cardigan. Hannah glanced at me, then at the hallway clock, as if time could pin me in place. Everything all right? She asked. The performance of concern. I slid my arms into the wool. Yes, I said. Everything is fine. Oliver followed me to the back step. He rubbed at his eyebrow the way he did as a boy when he'd broken something and didn't know how to tell me. It's just one night, he said. Tomorrow I'll sort the cabinet in the spare room. We'll make space. Tomorrow, I repeated, tasting the word and finding it thin. Good night, love. The shed door shut with the softest click. I spread the blanket, placed the pillow, and sat. I did not lie down. I let the quiet come all the way in. I watched dust turn in the beam from the small window, a galaxy for ants. My hands were steady in my lap. On the workbench, a jar of screws caught the porch light and made a small crown of shine. I picked up a pencil and the back of an old invoice and wrote 3 lines, neat as knitting. Bank at 9. Council office after. Locksmith on the way home. I set the pencil down. In the house, a toilet flushed, a tap ran, a door closed. My name did not travel with any of those sounds. That's all right, I thought. Names are for calling people to you, and I am calling myself. I drew the blanket around my shoulders, breathed once more, and let the night sit beside me like an old friend who never asks for anything I cannot give. I didn't answer the door right away. At my age, a knock can mean anything, from a neighbor bringing pie to trouble arriving uninvited. I looked through the peephole. It was Thomas. No smile, no groceries in his hands, just standing there in his neat work clothes, shifting from foot to foot like a boy caught stealing apples. I opened the door anyway. You changed the locks, he said, glancing at the new brass gleam above the handle. That's right, I replied, stepping aside. Come in, if you can manage without yelling. Inside, he paced, eyes darting around like something here had shifted besides the locks. Mother, you can't do this. You can't just— I can, I interrupted. And I have. His jaw tightened. We have bills, the car payment, the shed. He caught himself, but I'd already heard it. The shed? I repeated, my voice colder than the December wind outside. He looked away, muttering, You weren't supposed to hear that. Oh, but I did. I took a slow step toward him. Last week, you said, You'll sleep in the shed tonight. Your wife laughed. You thought I wouldn't notice? I noticed, Thomas. I always notice. He rubbed the back of his neck, just like his father used to do when cornered. We were joking. You're taking it the wrong way. No, I'm taking it the way it was meant. He tried another tactic, lowering his voice, softening his eyes. We're under pressure, you know that. Work's slow, the mortgage. And I've helped, I said, pointing toward the cabinet where my neatly labeled folders sat. Every loan, every grocery bill, every school fee for your children, it's all in there. But this house, I paused, meeting his gaze, is mine. My name is on the deed, and I decide who stays under this roof. His face flushed, not with shame, but with frustration. You're making a mistake. This family, I cut in, forgot I'm part of it the moment I stopped being useful to you. So yes, Thomas, I've changed the locks, and I've changed something else. You'll find out soon enough. For the first time since he walked in, he looked uncertain. What's that supposed to mean? I poured myself tea, not offering him any. It means the shed will stay empty. And so will my bank account, as far as you're concerned. The clock in the hallway ticked, steady as my heartbeat. He didn't answer right away, and I didn't fill the silence. I'd spent too many years filling silences for him. When he finally left, the door closed softer than I expected. I stood there for a moment, hand on the cool brass of the new lock, and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not revenge. Just the knowledge that, for the first time in a long while, I'd drawn a line. And I wasn't stepping back over it. The morning after Thomas left, I woke before the sun. Not because I couldn't sleep, though that happens often enough, but because my mind was already walking ahead of me, sorting through the next steps. The tea kettle hissed on the stove, the sound filling the kitchen the way conversation used to. I spread my bank statements across the table. 14 years' worth, neatly filed, every transaction marked in my own hand. I could see the story they told, clearer than any diary. Withdrawals in Thomas's handwriting, cash gifts to help with the children, loans for urgent repairs that never happened. I'd kept track because part of me believed that one day, when they finally saw what I'd done for them, they'd be grateful. But gratitude is like a check from someone who's always just about to pay. You wait, and it never comes. By 8 o'clock, I'd dressed and buttoned my coat. Today wasn't for sitting at the table with old paper. Today was for closing doors that had been left open far too long. The bank manager, a man younger than my grandson, greeted me with a smile that didn't quite hide his curiosity. "Mrs. Davies, what can we do for you today?" "I want to change my account access," I said, sliding my ID across the desk. "Remove any secondary names. No more joint authorizations, just mine." He clicked through screens, nodding. "That will mean your son won't be able to—" "Yes," I said, flat and final. "That's the idea." We went through signatures and confirmations. I made him print copies of everything. My father always said a woman should never sign anything without keeping her own record, and I've never regretted listening to him. From the bank, I walked to the solicitor's office. The receptionist offered me coffee, which I declined. My solicitor, Mrs. Kent, has a way of looking at you like she already knows what you're going to say, and she's usually right. "I want my will updated," I told her as I sat down, "and the deed to the house placed fully in my name. No shared claims, no future rights for anyone else unless I choose it." Mrs. Kent's eyebrows rose, but she didn't ask why. She just started writing. "Do you want to name new beneficiaries?" "Yes," I said, thinking of Lily and Max. "The grandchildren, directly. No middlemen. And a trust that they can only access when they're 30. By then, they'll know the value of something earned, not handed over." She smiled slightly at that. "Practical." It took hours, but by the time I left, the papers were in order. It's a strange feeling. Walking out of an office knowing your life on paper is different than it was when you walked in. Lighter, somehow. On the way home, I stopped at the locksmith again. "I'll need 2 more sets of keys," I said, "and a deadbolt for the back door." He looked at me as if I'd just told him I was moving into a fortress. Maybe I am. Back in my kitchen, I made tea and sat with the folders one last time before locking them in the cupboard. Outside, the wind moved through the garden, stirring the eucalyptus leaves into a sound like soft rain. It wasn't about shutting Thomas and Hannah out completely, though part of me thought they might leave me alone for a long while now. It was about putting the locks in my life where they should have been years ago, not just on doors, but on my time, my money, my peace. I thought about the shed. I'd go out tomorrow, clear it, maybe turn it into a little workshop. A place for me, not for punishment. A place where I could close the door and know it was mine. The phone rang in the late afternoon. It was Hannah, all sugar and thin patience. "Thomas said you've been busy today. Running errands?" "Yes," I said, stirring my tea. "Errands." "What kind?" she asked, and I could hear the strain under her voice. "The kind that keep me warm at night," I said, and took a slow sip. There was silence on the other end. A long one. "Well," she said finally, "I hope you're not doing anything rash." "I've lived long enough," I said, to know the difference between rash and necessary. After I hung up, I stood at the kitchen window and watched the light fade from the garden. The shed's roof caught the last of the sun, turning gold for a moment before the shadows took it. I thought about that, how things can shine right before they disappear into the dark. And I thought about how I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore, not when I could turn on my own light. The first real snow of the year came that night. By morning, the garden lay under a white quilt, the kind that hides weeds and broken branches and makes everything look cleaner than it is. I stood at the back door with my tea, watching the shed. Its roof held the snow evenly, no sagging, no leaks. That pleased me for reasons I couldn't quite explain. By 9 o'clock, I'd already made my bed, done the washing up, and carried a box of old linens down from the attic. Some were yellowed, some frayed, but a few, good cotton, still strong, went into the keep pile. I was sorting not just cloth, but years, deciding what stayed and what would leave this house along with other things that had outlived their welcome. Around mid-morning, I heard tires crunch on the driveway. Hannah's small silver car, her scarf bright against the snow. She didn't knock, just came in, brushing flakes from her shoulders. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, though we both knew she never came without a reason. Her eyes flicked to the deadbolt on the back door. "That's new." "Yes," I said. She gave a tight smile. "Thomas mentioned you've been reorganizing." "I have," I replied, folding a linen napkin. "Starting with my accounts, then the will, then the locks. Next, the rooms." Her smile thinned. "Mother, we've always tried to help you manage things." I looked up from the napkin. "No, Hannah, you've tried to manage me." She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Thomas worries about losing control over what was never his," I said evenly. "I'm still here, still capable, and now I'm ensuring I stay that way." Hannah's gaze drifted to the box of linens. "You're throwing things away?" "Donating," I corrected. "There's a women's shelter in town. They can use these." Something in her expression softened then, just for a second. "That's nice," she said, though her voice didn't match the words. She didn't stay long. When she left, I watched her from the kitchen window. She moved quickly to the car, head bent against the cold. But before getting in, she pulled out her phone. Her breath made a small cloud in the air as she spoke. I didn't need to hear the words to know she was calling Thomas. The rest of the day, I worked in the front room, moving furniture a little at a time. I'd always kept the heavy oak cabinet against the far wall because Thomas said it balanced the room, but I never liked it there. I pushed it under the window instead, where the winter light could fall across its top. On it, I placed a small lamp with a warm amber shade. The change was small, but felt like opening a window after years of stale air. That evening, the phone rang. "Thomas. Hannah said you've been busy." "I have," I said. "You're making changes without consulting anyone." "Yes," I said again, "because there's no one to consult." He made a sound somewhere between a sigh and a growl. This is still a family home. No, Thomas, it's my home. You have your own. You're pushing us away, he accused. I'm setting boundaries, I corrected. There's a difference. And if that feels like being pushed away, perhaps you were standing too close to begin with. The line went quiet. Then he said, We're coming over this weekend. All of us. We need to talk. That's fine, I replied. But understand, this is not a negotiation. After he hung up, I sat in my chair by the fire, the lamp's glow warming the room. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the footprints Hannah had left behind. I thought of how snow erases, how it offers a clean page. But come spring, what's underneath will show again. The difference now is that I'll decide what stays visible and what gets removed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever came next. They arrived on Sunday just after noon, the three of them stepping into the hallway like a weather front. Hannah brisk and pale, Thomas with his hands already clenched, and the children trailing behind, quiet in a way children shouldn't be. I'd set the table for lunch, nothing elaborate, a roast chicken, potatoes, carrots, bread still warm from the oven. I believe in feeding guests, even when the conversation will be hard to swallow. Thomas didn't sit right away. We need to talk before we eat, he said, as though the chicken might lose its nerve if we waited. Then talk, I replied, smoothing my napkin over my lap. He looked at Hannah, who cleared her throat. We're concerned about these sudden changes, the locks, the bank accounts, the will. I poured tea, steam rising between us. They're not sudden. They're long overdue. Thomas leaned forward, his voice low. You've always said family comes first. I still believe that, I said. I've just stopped mistaking control for care. He sat back, frowning. It feels like you don't trust us. I met his eyes. I don't. The silence that followed was thick enough to slice. Lily shifted in her chair, glancing from one adult to another. Max reached for a roll, then stopped, sensing the tension. Hannah tried again, her tone sweet but taut. If this is about the shed, it's not about the shed, I said, though we all knew it was partly about the shed. It's about years of small humiliations, about decisions made over my head, about being treated like a burden in the house I worked my whole life to keep. Thomas's jaw tightened. You're overreacting. No, I said softly. I'm reacting. There's a difference. We ate in near silence after that, the only sound the scrape of cutlery. Lily and Max ate quickly, then asked to be excused. I told them yes, and they disappeared upstairs. When the plates were cleared, Thomas pushed his chair back. We just don't want to see you make choices you'll regret. I folded the linen napkin and set it beside my plate. The only regret I have is waiting this long to make them. They left soon after, Hannah avoiding my eyes as she gathered her scarf. Thomas kissed my cheek out of habit, not warmth. The children waved from the car. When the door shut, the house was suddenly quiet again. I stood there for a moment, hand resting on the new lock, and thought about how calm I felt. They'd come to warn me, to bend me back into place. Instead, they'd found the ground firmer than before. Later, as I washed the dishes, I heard laughter from outside. It was the neighbors' children, throwing snow at each other, their cheeks red with cold. Their mother's voice called them in, warm and certain. I dried the plates and stacked them neatly in the cupboard. For years, I thought peace came from keeping everyone else comfortable, even at my expense. Now I'm learning it comes from making sure I'm not left out in the cold, shed, or no shed. And as I turned off the kitchen light, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of the next visit or the next argument. The house felt different now, not because of new locks or changed papers, but because it was mine again, in more ways than one. The Monday after their visit, I woke with a plan. Not the kind you write down in a notebook, but the kind that starts like a hum in your chest and grows until you can't ignore it. The house was mine again, but that wasn't enough. A bird doesn't just want a safe nest, it needs open sky. I dressed in my warmest coat, the one with deep pockets, and took the bus into town. The library was my first stop. I hadn't been in months, though once I'd gone every week. The woman at the desk, Nora, remembered me. "Mrs. Davies, we were starting to think you'd moved away." "Not yet," I said, smiling. "I'd like to renew my card." I walked the aisles slowly, running my fingers over the spines. I chose a crime novel, a gardening book, and a slim volume of poetry. On impulse, I signed up for the Thursday afternoon book club. I didn't ask anyone's opinion about it. From there, I crossed the square to the community center. Inside, a flyer board was covered in curling notices: yoga, knitting circles, a watercolor class. My eyes caught on one near the bottom. Volunteers needed. Women's shelter. I pulled the slip with the phone number before I could talk myself out of it. By noon, I was sitting in the corner cafe with a pot of tea and a sandwich. It had been years since I'd eaten lunch out alone without feeling conspicuous. Now, I found it pleasant. No one to rush me, no one to comment on what I ordered. When I got home, I put the groceries away and left the books on the kitchen table. The afternoon light poured in through the front window, touching the oak cabinet I'd moved. I sat there, letting the quiet settle. At 3 o'clock, the phone rang. Hannah again. "Thomas said you were in town today," she said, her voice careful. "Yes, the library, the community center, lunch." There was a pause. "You should have told us. We could have driven you." "I prefer the bus," I said. "You see more of life that way." She didn't answer right away. "It just worries us, you being out alone." "I've been out alone most of my life, Hannah. And I'm still here." I could almost hear her swallow her next words. "Well, I suppose if it makes you happy." "It does," I said simply. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and read 3 chapters of the crime novel. Outside, the snow had begun to melt, revealing patches of brown grass. The shed's roof dripped steadily. In the evening, I called the number from the flyer. A warm voice answered, introducing herself as Marion, the shelter's coordinator. We talked for 20 minutes. By the end of the call, I was signed up to sort donations every Friday morning. It felt like a small thing, but also enormous. I'd spent so long with my world narrowed to this house, my routines, their visits. Now I could see the edges stretching outward again. Before bed, I stood in the hallway, looking at the new deadbolt on the back door. I thought of how Thomas had frowned at it, how Hannah had eyed it like it was a wall between us. Maybe it was. But walls can be for keeping things safe, not just for keeping things out. I locked the door, turned off the light, and went to bed with the contentment of someone who's just remembered she owns both the nest and the sky above it. Friday morning, I woke before the alarm. Habit, I suppose. I used to rise early to prepare breakfasts for everyone else, thinking it was love. This time, I was up for myself. I put on a thick jumper, wool trousers, and boots I hadn't worn in years. Outside, the air was bright and cold enough to bite. The shelter was on the far side of town, in a low brick building with a mural of wildflowers painted across the front. Inside, The air was warmer and smelled faintly of coffee and laundry powder. Marian met me at the door. She was a brisk woman in her 60s, with silver hair cut short and eyes that noticed everything. "Margaret, you're early," she said, smiling. "That's my kind of volunteer." She showed me the donation room, a space lined with shelves and bins, some neatly stacked, others overflowing. "We sort by type and condition," she explained. "Clothes, linens, toys, kitchenware. Anything clean and usable, we keep. Anything too far gone, we pass on to recycling." I started with a box of winter coats, some with buttons missing, some still carrying the faint scent of someone else's home. My hands knew the work without being told, folding, smoothing, pairing gloves. It reminded me of raising Thomas, back when care had been a simple thing, not a ledger to be tallied. Around 10 o'clock, another volunteer came in, a woman named June. She was my age, maybe older, with laugh lines and a voice like warm bread. We worked side by side, talking about nothing urgent: recipes, the best place to buy good tea, the weather. It was the kind of conversation that doesn't demand you give away more than you want to. By noon, we'd sorted 3 boxes and made a dent in a 4th. Marian came by with mugs of tea. "You're a natural," she told me. "It's just sorting," I said. "It's more than that," she replied. "Everything here was given because someone thought it might help. You're part of making sure it does." That stayed with me longer than I expected. When I left, the sun was melting the last of the snow from the pavements. I walked to the bus stop with a lightness in my step I hadn't felt in years. Back home, I put my boots away and made lunch. The phone was silent all afternoon, which was a gift. I read a few chapters of my library book and let the hours pass without hurry. In the evening, Thomas called. "Hannah says you're volunteering now?" "Yes," I said, buttering a slice of bread. He hesitated. "You're sure you can manage that? Every week?" "I can manage," I said, taking a bite, "and I intend to." He sighed. "I just don't want you wearing yourself out." "Thomas," I said, "I'm not wearing out. I'm wearing in." There was a pause, and then he changed the subject. We didn't speak long. When I hung up, I realized I wasn't angry, just detached, like his opinion belonged to another life I no longer needed to consult. Before bed, I wrote the next Friday's shift into my calendar in ink. Not pencil, ink. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the week ahead belonged to me. The following Tuesday, I walked into Mrs. Kent's office with my head high and a folder under my arm. The last time I'd been here, I'd left with drafts and promises. Today, I intended to leave with final papers. Mrs. Kent greeted me with the same knowing half-smile she'd worn before. "Margaret, I've got everything ready for you." Her office smelled faintly of furniture polish and the lavender hand cream she always used. On the desk, 2 neat stacks of documents waited, their crisp edges promising both change and finality. "This," she said, tapping the first stack, "is the updated deed. Sole ownership, no survivorship clauses. As of your signature, the property belongs entirely to you, legally, without contest." I traced my finger along the top page. "And no one can reverse that without my consent?" "No one," she said firmly. "Not even your son." I nodded, feeling something loosen in my chest. She slid the second stack toward me. "And this is the trust for your grandchildren. The terms you set are here: no access until they're 30, direct transfer without parental mediation." I signed each page carefully, not rushing. My father used to say a signature was a kind of oath. You should never give it thoughtlessly. Mrs. Kent notarized the papers with her precise, looping initials. When it was done, she handed me my copies in a leather folder. "Margaret, you've just taken full control of your estate. How does it feel?" I smiled, small but sure. Like, I've just locked the last door I needed to. On the walk home, the wind was sharp, but it didn't bother me. The papers in my bag felt like armor. Every step seemed lighter, not because the ground had changed, but because I had. When I reached the house, the phone was ringing. I almost let it go to voicemail, but old habits die slowly. It was Thomas. "Hannah says you've been finalizing things." His tone had that careful edge he used when trying not to sound accusatory. "Yes," I said simply. "You didn't tell us." "I didn't need to," I replied. He exhaled sharply. "Mother, this secrecy, it's not healthy." I laughed, not unkindly. "Thomas, keeping something safe is not the same as keeping it secret. I'm doing what's healthy for me." There was a long pause before he said, "You're shutting us out." "I'm giving myself room," I corrected. "If that feels like being shut out, maybe you've been standing in the doorway too long." We ended the call soon after. I set the folder in the locked cabinet next to my other important documents. The key went on a small chain I wore under my sweater. That evening, I made a pot of vegetable soup, enough to share. I carried a container next door to Mrs. Jenkins, who lived alone with her cat and a television that always seemed too loud. She thanked me with a surprised smile. When I came back, I lit the amber-shaded lamp on the oak cabinet. The light fell across the room just as I'd imagined when I moved it. I sat in my chair with a cup of tea, looking around at the space that was finally, completely mine. And for the first time in years, I knew that if anyone tried to take it from me, I had both the means and the will to stop them. It was 2 weeks before I heard from them again, long enough for me to believe, foolishly, that they'd accepted the new boundaries. Then, one gray Thursday, Thomas rang. His voice was unusually light, almost cheerful. "Mum, can we pop round this evening? Just for a chat." I knew better than to believe in casual visits from my son. "You can," I said. "But I'm not rearranging my evening for you. I have a book club at the library at 7. A pause. "Book club?" "Yes. We're reading Hardy this month. Do you like Hardy, Thomas?" He didn't answer the question. "We'll come by at 5 then." At 5 sharp, the doorbell rang. They came in with practiced smiles, Hannah carrying a paper bag of biscuits, Thomas holding his coat over one arm. The children weren't with them. "Thought it could be just the adults tonight," Hannah said, as if this were a treat. I made tea but didn't set out plates. We sat in the front room, the amber lamp glowing between us. Thomas began. "We've been talking, Mum. We're concerned. You've been making a lot of changes lately, and we're worried about you being on your own so much." "I've been on my own longer than you think," I said, pouring tea. Hannah leaned forward. "It's just, well, family should be together. You could still move in with us. We'd look after you. Like you did when you offered me the shed." The question landed heavy. Hannah flushed. "That was exactly what it sounded like," I finished for her. Thomas tried again, gentler this time. "Look, we know you've changed the will. We heard about the trust for the kids." I met his eyes. "Then you know everything you need to know." He sighed, and the performance began in earnest. "We only want what's best for you. Managing the bills, the house, these things are stressful. You could let us take some of that weight." "And what would I carry instead?" I asked quietly. They exchanged a glance, the kind that passes whole paragraphs in a marriage. Hannah put on a soft voice, almost breaking. "It hurts. feeling like you don't trust us. I leaned back in my chair. Trust is earned, Hannah, and once lost, it's rarely given back. You both have shown me exactly how much my comfort matters to you. Silence. Even the clock in the hall seemed to hold its breath. Thomas finally said, "If you ever change your mind." "I won't," I interrupted. "But thank you for coming by." The dismissal was clear. Hannah's smile froze in place. Thomas stood, pulling on his coat with a sharp movement. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said. "I do," I replied. At the door, Hannah pressed the bag of biscuits into my hand. "For later," she said. After they left, I put the biscuits straight into the cupboard, unopened. Not because I didn't like them, but because I knew exactly what they were. A prop in a play I no longer intended to watch. I left the lamp on and went to my book club. We sat around a long table in the library's back room, a dozen women, all with lines on their faces that told better stories than Hardy ever could. We drank tea from mismatched mugs and argued about Tess's choices, each of us certain we could have done better, though life had probably proven otherwise. When I walked home under the streetlights, the air was cold enough to make my breath visible. The shed roof gleamed faintly in the moonlight. I thought of how Thomas and Hannah had sat in my living room, trying to make their voices sound like concern when the real music was control. The difference now was simple. I could hear the tune, and I didn't have to dance. The next morning, I woke with an idea so clear it felt as if someone had whispered it to me in my sleep. The house should look the way I want it to, not the way anyone else left it. I started in the kitchen. The heavy curtains Hannah insisted on years ago, to keep the heat in, came down first. Underneath, the glass was smudged from winters of trapped light. I washed them until the cold morning sun poured in unhindered. The room looked wider, cleaner, like it had taken a deep breath. Next, I opened every cupboard. Out went the chipped mugs, the mismatched plastic containers with no lids, the ugly serving dish Thomas had given me because it was on sale. I boxed it all for the charity shop. I kept only what I liked: the blue teapot from my mother, the white plates I'd bought with my first paycheck, the 2 crystal glasses I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to come. From now on, every day was special enough. By midday, the dining room was bare of the massive oak table that had dominated it. A neighbor, Mr. Ellis, helped me carry it into his van. He wanted it for his daughter's first flat. In its place, I put a small round table near the window, just big enough for me and one guest. After lunch, I went into the garden. The snow was mostly gone, leaving the earth dark and damp. The shed stood there, patient as always. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of cedar from the old toolbox. I swept the floor, brushed down the cobwebs, and opened the small window to let the air change. For years, the shed had been storage, a place where things went to be forgotten. Now, I wanted it to be a place I went to remember myself. I moved in an old armchair, a small rug, and a standing lamp from the spare room. I brought out a basket of yarn and my knitting needles. By the time the light began to fade, the shed was no longer a punishment in waiting. It was a retreat. In the evening, I made a simple supper and ate at my new table. The space felt quiet, not empty. I realized how much of the old arrangement had been for appearances, space for large family meals that happened less and less, furniture placed for people who came to visit but didn't really stay. The phone rang just as I was washing my plate. It was June from the shelter. "I've got extra fabric donations here. Would you like some for your knitting projects?" Yes, I said. Bring them by when you can. I've just made room. After we hung up, I sat in my armchair by the fire. The amber-shaded lamp glowed against the walls, softening the corners of the room. Outside, the shed's window reflected a small square of light into the garden, like a lighthouse on a calm night. I thought about how strange it was that reclaiming a space could change the way you moved through it. The kitchen felt like mine because my hands had stripped and cleaned it. The dining room felt like mine because I'd chosen what stayed. The shed felt like mine because I'd refused to let it be a place of exile. For years I'd accepted the arrangement as it was, because changing it would cause comment, because I didn't want to be accused of making a fuss. But there is a quiet kind of fuss worth making, the kind that leaves you sitting in a room that looks exactly the way you want it to. I went to bed early that night, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to wake up sooner to see it all again in the morning light. They came unannounced on a Saturday morning, just after I'd set the kettle on. I saw their car through the front window. Thomas at the wheel, Hannah in her neat scarf, the children in the back. I had no time to hide the changes, and I didn't want to. When I opened the door, Lily and Max ran in first. Lily stopped short in the dining room, her eyes wide. "Where's the big table?" "Gone," I said, smiling. "I've made space for something better." Thomas stepped in, scanning the room. His gaze moved from the small round table to the bare walls, to the sunlight spilling in from the uncovered windows. "You've redecorated." "I've reclaimed," I corrected. Hannah's voice was careful. "It looks different." "It feels different too," I said, leading them toward the kitchen. The curtains were gone there as well, the light sharp and honest over the countertops. The mismatched clutter was gone. The shelves held only the things I chose. Hannah reached for a mug, then stopped when she saw there were only 4 matching ones left. "Where's the rest?" "Charity shop," I said, pouring tea into the blue pot from my mother. I decided I only need what I use and enjoy. We sat for tea, though the air felt more like an inspection than a visit. Thomas kept glancing toward the garden, so I let him see it. When we stepped outside, the children went ahead. Lily opened the shed door before I could say a word. "Grandma, you made it pretty." The inside smelled faintly of cedar and wool. The armchair sat in the corner on its rug, the standing lamp ready to glow at night. A basket of yarn rested by the chair, and my half-finished scarf lay neatly on top. Thomas frowned. "You've been spending time out here?" "Yes," I said. "It's mine now. I've made it a place to think, read, knit. Somewhere quiet." He looked around as if searching for something to criticize. "It's not insulated." "I have blankets," I replied. Hannah smiled tightly. "It's nice, I suppose. But isn't it lonely?" "No," I said, looking straight at her. "It's peaceful." Lily curled up in the armchair, running her fingers over the knitting. "I like it here." Max tugged at my sleeve. "Can I come and read with you sometime?" "Of course," I said, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the lamp. Thomas cleared his throat. "We just worry about you, Mom. You've made so many changes. It's like you're living my own life?" I finished for him. He didn't answer. Hannah's eyes were on the armchair, her mouth pressed in a line. I knew she was thinking about the night she'd told me to sleep in here, and how different it looked now, how I'd taken her intended insult and turned it into something she couldn't touch. After tea, they left quickly. No lingering, no casual talk about the week ahead. I stood at the front window and watched the car pull away. When the garden was quiet again, I went back to the shed. I sat in the chair, pulled the blanket over my knees, and picked up my knitting. Through the small window, I could see the garden, the eucalyptus tree swaying slightly in the wind. I thought about the look on Hannah's face, the way Thomas had walked through the house as if cataloging what was no longer his to influence. And I realized this was the moment they understood. I wasn't just locking them out. I was unlocking parts of myself they couldn't manage or diminish. It was a victory without noise, without speeches. Just a woman in her own chair, in her own shed, working on a scarf that would be finished in her own time. It was Lily who called me first, not Thomas, not Hannah. Lily. Her voice was quiet, as if she were speaking from a corner where no one could overhear. "Grandma," she said, "can I come over after school on Friday?" "Just me." I didn't ask why. "Of course," I said. "I'll meet you at the bus stop." Friday came with a pale winter sun and a sharp wind. I waited by the bus shelter, my scarf pulled tight. When Lily stepped down, she smiled in a way that told me she'd been holding it in all week. At home, I put the kettle on and let her choose biscuits from the tin. She picked the shortbread, 3 pieces, and we sat at the small round table. "Everything looks different," she said, looking around the kitchen. "Brighter." "That's because I took down the heavy curtains," I told her. "Light is free. You should never let anyone charge you for it." She laughed, then grew serious. "Mum says you're being stubborn. Dad says you're making things hard for everyone." I stirred my tea. Sometimes doing what's right for yourself will feel wrong to people who liked it better when you had less power. She thought about that for a while, nibbling her biscuit. "I like it here," she said at last. "It feels calm." After tea, we went out to the shed. She curled up in the armchair again, pulling the blanket over her knees. "It's warm," she said, surprised. "Wool and a good chair go a long way," I said, handing her a book from the small shelf I'd started. She began to read, her voice soft but steady. I picked up my knitting, the rhythm of the needles, a quiet background to her words. After a few chapters, she put the book down. "Grandma, do you ever get lonely?" I looked at her. Really looked. "I get alone," I said. "But that's different from lonely. Lonely is when you're with people who make you feel invisible. Alone is when you can see yourself clearly." Her brow furrowed. "Mum says you're not being fair." "Fair," I said, "is making sure everyone gets what they deserve, not what they demand." The wind picked up outside, rattling the shed's small window. She pulled the blanket tighter. "I want to be like you when I'm older," she said suddenly. "Then start now," I told her. "Know what you will and won't accept. Don't wait for someone else to give you permission to protect yourself." We walked back to the house as the light began to fade. She helped me set the table for supper, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who felt welcome. When Thomas came to collect her later, his eyes narrowed slightly at the changes he saw again. The open space, the tidy shelves, the shed's faint glow through the garden. He asked no questions in front of Lily, but I could see them sitting behind his teeth. After they drove away, I washed the cups and thought about the way Lily's eyes had shone when she said she liked it here. She had seen a different way to be in a home, not a place where control is disguised as care, but where care is as plain as the tea on the table and the light through the windows. And I realized something. If I could give her that, even for an afternoon, then all the locks, all the boundaries, all the changes were more than worth it. It was Thomas again, this time on a Wednesday evening. His voice was brisk, businesslike, as if we were discussing a utility bill. "Mum, I've been thinking," he began. "You've been covering a lot of expenses on your own. Heating, repairs, food. We don't want you struggling. We'd like to set up a monthly transfer into your account." A pause. "No conditions?" he added quickly, too quickly. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words hang in the air. "That's generous of you." "It's not generosity," he said. "It's family." I thought of all the years I'd been family enough to pay for uniforms, school trips, deposits on their first house. And I thought of the shed, and the night his wife had decided it was fit for me to sleep in. "I'm not struggling," I said finally. "And if I were, I'd handle it." He tried a different tack. "You've always said you want to see us more. This would make things easier. We could help with the groceries or the garden." "Thomas," I interrupted, "money has strings. Even when people swear it doesn't, the strings are just hidden better." Silence. Then, softer. "You think we'd use it against you?" "I think you already did," I said. He exhaled through his nose, the sound sharp. "We're trying to build bridges." "Then stop sending bricks," I replied. He didn't know what to do with that. We ended the call soon after, each of us holding our own silences. The next morning, I went into town and bought myself a small bunch of daffodils, still tight in their buds. I set them on the dining table, the yellow just beginning to peek through. I liked the idea that they'd open when they were ready, not a moment sooner. That afternoon, Hannah rang. Her voice was sweetened, like tea with too much sugar. "Thomas says you refused the money. We just want to make sure you're—" "Okay. I'm fine," I said. "Better than fine. I've been volunteering, reading, fixing the shed. The house is warm, the bills are paid. What exactly am I supposed to need from you?" She hesitated. "It's not about need. It's about connection." I glanced at the vase of daffodils. If connection means I have to owe you something, it's not connection. It's control. Her sigh was faint, but I heard it. "You've changed, Margaret." "No," I said. "I've stopped pretending." When I hung up, I went to the shed. The light through the small window was soft, dust turning slowly in the air. I sat in the chair, knitting in my lap, and thought about how easy it is to confuse help with ownership. The scarf was nearly finished now, thick and warm, the colors blending from deep green to gold. I decided I'd give it to Lily. Not for her birthday, not for Christmas. Just because she'd sat here with me and understood what this space meant. By evening, the daffodils on the table had begun to open. I boiled an egg, made toast, and ate while the light faded from the garden. The shed's window glowed faintly in the dark, a reminder that there was a place in this world that was entirely mine. And no matter how many offers came, wrapped in politeness or sugar, I had no intention of selling that back for the price of anyone's help. They came together this time, Thomas, Hannah, and no children. That was my first sign. If they didn't bring Lily and Max, they wanted privacy for something they didn't want overheard. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of winter day when the air feels thin and the sun never quite commits. I was in the shed, knitting, when the knock came. Not the tentative tap of a neighbor, but 3 firm raps. I opened the front door to see them both standing there, Hannah clutching her handbag like a shield. "We need to talk," Thomas said, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. I followed them into the front room. The amber-shaded lamp was already on, casting its warm circle of light. They didn't sit until I did. Thomas placed a manila envelope on the table between us. "We've had some advice," he began. From a financial planner. I looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. And? It would be safer, he said, if we set up a joint arrangement for the house and your accounts. That way, if anything happens to you, we can act quickly, pay bills, arrange care, keep everything in order. Safer for who? I asked. For everyone, Hannah said, leaning forward. You wouldn't have to worry about paperwork or legal fees. We could handle it. You'd have peace of mind. I took a slow breath. I already have peace of mind. I created it myself when I took my name back off anything that wasn't mine alone. Thomas pushed the envelope a little closer. Just read it. No pressure to sign now. We just want you to see it. I didn't reach for it. Do you remember, Thomas? The night Hannah told me I'd sleep in the shed? Hannah's mouth tightened. That was a joke. No, it wasn't, I said evenly. And I remember exactly how it felt to stand in this house knowing that's what my family thought of me. So forgive me if I don't believe that signing away control of my home and my money would give me peace of mind. Thomas's jaw tightened. We're not trying to take anything from you. You already tried, I said softly. Now you're just trying to make it easier next time. Hannah straightened, her voice sharper. You're being unreasonable. No, I said. I'm being very reasonable. I'm choosing not to give anyone the keys to my life, especially people who've already shown me they'd rather see me out of the house than in it. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the faint tick of the clock in the hallway. Finally, Thomas stood. If you change your mind, I won't, I said, meeting his eyes. And I want you to take that envelope with you. He hesitated, then picked it up, tucking it under his arm. Hannah rose slowly, her gaze flicking around the room, as if looking for some sign that she'd missed a chance to reclaim it. At the door, I added, This is the last conversation we'll have about my house, my accounts, or my will. The next time you bring it up, I'll end the visit immediately. They both froze for a second, as if testing whether I meant it. Then they stepped outside, into the brittle winter air. I watched them walk to the car without speaking to each other. When they drove away, I didn't feel triumph. I felt stillness, like a lake after the wind has dropped. I went back to the shed, picked up my knitting, and worked another few rows. The scarf was almost done now. I imagined Lily wearing it, the green and gold catching the light as she walked. The thought warmed me more than any heater could. The scarf was finished on a clear February morning. I folded it carefully and wrapped it in brown paper, tying it with a piece of green twine. No note, no card. Lily would know it was from me. I walked it to her school just before the afternoon bell. When she came out, she spotted me straight away, her face lighting up in a way that made the cold air feel softer. This is for you, I said, handing her the package. She opened it right there on the pavement, her small fingers quick on the twine. When she saw the scarf, she held it to her cheek. It's warm, she said. It's yours, I told her. Wear it whenever you like. No saving it for special occasions. Every day is special enough. She wrapped it around her neck, the green and gold bright against her school coat. Mum says green doesn't suit me, she said. Mum's wrong, I replied. Green suits you very well. She smiled at that, and we walked to the bus stop together. I waved her off, watching her through the window as the bus pulled away, her scarf catching the last of the afternoon light. Back home, the garden was still bare from winter, but the daffodils in the dining room had opened fully, their yellow heads turning toward the glass. I sat in my chair by the amber-shaded lamp, the house quiet around me. Not empty, just quiet. There had been no more conversations about joint arrangements or help with expenses. Thomas and Hannah still called, still visited sometimes, but the tone had changed. They stepped more carefully now, as if aware of the line I'd drawn and unwilling to risk crossing it. The shed had become part of my daily life. I read there, knitted, even wrote letters I never intended to send. It was mine in a way few things ever had been, not just because of the lock on the door, but because I'd claimed it without asking permission. I thought often about the day I'd changed the locks, how small that act had seemed compared to the ripples it made. I'd believed then that the fight was about my house, my money, my comfort. It was, in truth, about my right to decide for myself. That's what they never said out loud, but it's what they wanted most. The ability to make my life smaller when it suited them. And that's what I'd refused. The victory wasn't in any single conversation or signature. It was in the way I woke up each morning now, not with dread, not waiting for someone else's plans to decide my day, but with a sense that the hours ahead were mine to fill. If I've learned anything worth passing on, it's this. You don't have to be loud to be firm. You don't have to fight in public to win in private. And you don't need anyone's blessing to protect what's yours, your home, your time, your peace. Locks are not just for doors. They're for your boundaries, your self-respect, your sense of worth. So if you're reading this and thinking of the shed in your own life, the place they'd put you if they could, remember, you can change the locks. You can clear it out. You can turn it into something beautiful. And when you do, you won't just have a room of your own. You'll have yourself back. If my story has stirred something in you, don't leave it at that feeling. Act on it. Protect what's yours. Draw the line and stand on the side that's worth defending. You might be surprised at how quickly the world changes once you do.